900 alunni, circa 400 alla scuola secondaria di primo grado e 500 circa alla scuola primaria. Quindi è un istituto grande e anche molto complesso, perché abbiamo all'interno del nostro istituto una grande presenza sia in termini assoluti che anche percentuali di alunni con bisogni educativi speciali e in particolare un aumento progressivo di alunni con disturbi evolutivi, ad esempio disturbi dell'attenzione, problemi di comportamento.
La scuola, che oggigiorno è comunque diventato un luogo in cui le tensioni della società odierna si fanno sentire, dove c'è comunque tanta frenesia, i bambini hanno sempre tanto da fare a scuola perché gli stimoli sono tanti, hanno tanto da fare fuori scuola perché ci sono le attività extrascolastiche, perché ci sono gli impegni dei genitori, i tempi sono sempre ristretti.
Quando una mia insegnante mi ha proposto questo progetto che conosceva, ho pensato perché no? Perché no? Perché non provare? I feedback che sono arrivati dagli alunni, che sono tutti alunni della scuola primaria, siamo partiti con 5 classi della scuola primaria, quarte e quinte, sono stati estremamente positivi, sorprendentemente positivi. E questo lo hanno notato sia gli alunni che lo hanno scritto proprio: mi sento più tranquillo, mi sento più calmo, riesco a pensare meglio, che gli insegnanti. Si accorgono che da quando gli alunni della loro classe meditano, questo ricade ovviamente anche sulle relazioni all'interno del gruppo classe.
Eine viel gelassenere Stimmung in der Klasse, es ist viel leichter zu arbeiten, die Kinder sind nicht mehr so unruhig, sie finden ihre Arbeit, bleiben bei ihrer Arbeit und sind auch untereinander viel netter zueinander.
Mi aiuta molto per la concentrazione, mi riesco a concentrare un po' meglio. La mattina mi dà energia per continuare la giornata e il pomeriggio mi rilassa. Quando facevo le verifiche ero agitata e non riuscivo a scrivere, invece adesso mi aiuta la meditazione perché non sono più tanto agitata.
Da quando ho iniziato la meditazione mi sento più forte di carattere, cioè in senso che già lo scorso anno ero molto sensibile e adesso so reagire e mi sono rafforzato. Anche con gli amici sono adesso molto più socievole, più sicuro di me.
I would like just to introduce myself. I am Maria Rita Bracchini, and I am the head of the coordinate of the European Cooperation unit in Fondazione Villa Montesca, which is the coordinating organization of the project. I would like, before all, to thanks all the partners, of course, and to thanks Mr. Eugenio Delfino, who is our project officer here in the agency, European agency, and really was very helpful and supportive, and that's very important when you manage a project. And I would like just to thank also Mrs. Nadia Ferreira of the monitoring team of the Directorate General for Education of Portugal, who as well supported a lot the project in the implementation in Portugal, and of course all the implementation partners and all the monitoring partners and all the people and the schools and masters who worked in this project. Why we are here? I would like to start telling you a brief story, which is the story of Villa Montesca. You can see some images of where we are. We are exactly in the center of Italy. And the story of Villa Montesca is interlinked with the story of education. First of all, because in 1909 there was written the Montessori method by Maria Montessori, and other of that because our founders were two barons, very innovative person, and the baroness called Alice was deeply involved in fostering education and social inclusion. And more than 100 years ago, in 1906, she came here in Brussels, and because there was the exposition, Universal Exposition, and she was invited to present the work done in Villa Montesca. In Villa Montesca at the time, some rural schools, a new form of education were implemented by the barons and the baroness. And the aim was to give education to the children of the workers, of the land workers, because their feeling and their deep thought was fostering education, inclusive education, and give an eye to poor people in order to be prepared for life, for a better life. And in this framework, for instance, a lot of innovative methods were implemented there, or approaches more than methods. For instance, the free drawings that was absolutely new at the time, or the conversation as a meaning of growth, or the observation of nature. And on that basis, when she came here in Villa Montesca, she left a letter to the teachers, to the educative system, and she wrote, education is a global topic, and we have to open eyes to the approaches that are implemented in different parts of the world. And she was very curious to know what in other countries the people, the educative systems did at the time in order to bring things and put such kind of things in the schools she created, and fostered education in a way that it was linked to the social growth, to the social inclusion of the marginalized people. So when, this is the story of our barons, but when we met the wonderful people are here today, explaining us the power of this approach, we said, with this legacy, why not? Why not to try? Why not? Also because Alice also went to India. She was attracted by the Vedic culture. And so we tried. And as you can see, as you will see, we had a very huge impact where we implemented the method and the quiet time transcendental meditation method. And also because this is a follow-up of a previous project through which we put some elements in some countries. And with this project, we had the opportunity to grow in those countries where we already worked. And we have new countries that are implemented and are working through this approach. And other than this, we not only worked with classes, with students, with teachers from 7, 6 to 18, 16, 17 years old, but also with adults. And there are very interesting experience in prisons. And today we will have the opportunity to see what we did. Just a very brief introduction about this morning. You have the agenda. You see that there are a lot of speakers and contributors. The first part is more related to the project, a project seen as a system because, of course, you have in mind some goals, you have some actions that has to be interlinked in order to reach the goals, the implementation. But other than this, of course, we would like to measure the impact of the project. So we will see how we measured the impact since the beginning till the end of the project. And at the end, we have learned some lessons, and we have the ambitions also to say, okay, we have learned so much within this project, and we would like to recommend also to policymakers some aspects that are gathered from the experience that we did. And in the second part, that will be monitored by my dear colleague, Richard Johnson, we will go to the life of the project. And so we will see how the students reacted, how the teachers participated, how their work was done, and how the emotions were connected with the good results in terms of reducing anxiety, of being more focused, but a lot of these results were interlinked with a deeper emotional path that our students and our teachers did together with us. I don't want to waste more time because, as I said before, we have a lot of speakers, and I would like to invite my director, the director of Fondazione Villa Montesca, Fabrizio Boldrini, and Frans van As from the University of Leuven. And the first part, which is the context where we are, is about social inclusion through education, inclusive education and well-being. Because one of the goals that we wanted to reach, putting together action, was the well-being of students. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Margarita, for your passion, first of all. And thank you, everybody, for having invited the Foundation to be here today in this wonderful place to show some final results of this project. I think when we start a new project, we start, thank you, an ambition to get something for the children. You know that the Montesca Foundation has somehow some Montessori roots, and so it's very important to understand, to say that at the end of 2 years of hard work, we have to present something. Not something just in terms to say we accomplish a work, but something that will be something more for the children. This is very important for us, for our tradition. My role is to present some discussion, some point of discussion about multiculturalism and well-being, and the impact that my colleague Frans will develop better than me, much better than me in his speech. But it's very important to say this because I think that when we speak about well-being in schools, we are generally worried about the impact that the multiculturalism can have in our classes. And in general, people, especially in my country, in Italy, is quite worried about what is happening when people from other cultures, other religions, other languages come, and we need to do something for promoting their integration. Sometimes this is also lived in negative sense because when we speak about tolerance, we use a word that means that I have to, I'm forced to do something for facing this problem, tolerance. Well-being is something different, and we are also very often forced to think that the well-being is something that is related to the personal approaches of the students in the classroom when they feel well, but is also related to something that is more connected also with the opportunity they have to learn. And to learn and to develop a critical sense. The word multiculturalism seems to come from the first multicultural experiment that was led by Herodotus in the stories. He told that that they tried to put together the Indians, Kayyats, with the Greeks, and to see what if it's possible for people so different to have a common place to live. As probably you already read this story, but the Kayyats started to say that for them it was very important to eat the dead people, because it's something that allowed the soul of the people to remain in the community. And for the Greeks, it was opposite. They burn the dead people because it's something that would make possible to make their soul to be free in the air. But what is relevant that all the parts believed that the other were very barbaric, so it was impossible to accept what the other. They were shocked by the behaviors of the other ones, and is something that in the modern times, an anthropologist, Malinowski, maybe you are quite familiar, underlined when he visited the Traban Islands, far away from here, from Brussels, when he discovered that the sexual behaviors were so different from what we normally are used to live. And because the families somewhere encourage the children to have sexual encounters with many other colleagues, and because it was a way to create the community. And of course, quite different from what my mother used to do when I was a young student. And what Malinowski underlined is that we have to open our eyes. It uses exactly this word. We have to open our eyes in their words. So we have to open our eyes in their world, and there's something that the Transcendental Meditation encourages us to do. And first of all, as you know, Maria Montessori started the first study about the well-being, putting this in relationship with two main things: the place where we are, because it was quite revolutionary. For the first time, she tried to create classes where the children were able to stand up, to move, and in 19th century schools were really forbidden. Discipline was the word. You know that also nowadays the Montessori method is somehow accused to not be able to assure the discipline in the classroom, because the children are free to move, are free to ask questions. And the second idea promoted by Maria Montessori was that if you promote this freedom movement, you have also to have a look when in what measure this freedom takes the idea of the freedom of expressing opinions. It's something not just related to the physical idea of movement, but also to the conceptual idea of creating learning. And somehow this idea, I think, was confirmed by a group of expert authors that discovered in quite recent time what we used to call the mirror neurons. You know that a group of Italian authors related to the Professor Rizzolatti and the Professor Fogassi discovered that we have some neurons that allow us to react positively when someone are doing something. Is a connection that our brain allow us to do. So this underlines the relevance that we have to also not just assure the freedom of movement, not just assure the freedom of conceptual expression, the conceptual opinions, but also to have a look to the condition of the equilibrium we have to assure between brain and body. And this is a contribution that the Transcendental Meditation can assure us, I think. This is the way we feel empathy. When Margarita and me, we were for another project, we are doing some seminars to the very, very young students, and when we ask what is empathy, we start a discussion, and it's simply the way that pushes us maybe to be excited during the final scene of Titanic, when everyone dies, and we try to be moved by this situation, even if at a conceptual level we are quite aware that this is a famous actor that are taking a lot of money to do this. Everything is fake. There is no real incidents. There are no real people that died. But we are involved in the situation, and this situation takes us to have a real emotional reaction. As empathy is something that also allows us to promote well-being, because we are, as Goleman, you know that the famous author Goleman that wrote this seminal book about emotional intelligence, underlined that we can define the empathy in a simple way, to be in the other's shoes, to feel what the other are feeling, and I think is a way that we can promote in this sense. Just to finish my contribution, because the agenda is so long, so I would like to be short. I generally cannot succeed in this, but I try to do my best. Maria Montessori says that the children in the first stage, she was a bit fixed about the idea of development. In the measure that someone says that she was not really a pedagogy, she was an expert of development. She was really fixed. If you are familiar with the Montessori method, you know that they have this circle, these triangles to define the different stages of development. And in a measure that someone also writes that Montessori tried to put her method in a track, define, to follow something that is quite fixed. And I don't know if it's true. Probably it's true. But we will discuss in the next meeting. And but she writes that we have something that we can define. She defines with in Greek words, orme. Orme is something that is when the brain starts being free to accept other information, and is something that is not defined. yet, something that is not really related to the process of formal learning. It's spontaneous in a way, but we have to guide this process. And something that is quite confused, that slowly can be transformed in concept, in actions, and in things that we can put in the room of our brain. And I think that is this idea to start the meditation in the schools where the children are involved in this process of transforming the concept that are in the Orme phase to something that is more conceptual. And in the teacher's effort to guide them, we can find a space also to think that a part of the well-being is related to the attitude we have to learn. And I think our project shows that, of course, we need more researchers, we need more experiences, but I think our project shows that we can use somehow transcendental meditation in different contexts, even in a multicultural context where it seems to be more difficult to create a common environment for integration. And maybe the solution is not just that one, but can be a contribution. Thank you very much.
Okay, Fabrizio puts in evidence the link between motivation to learn and equilibrium between mind and body, and motivation to learn means also stay well in class, and so the well-being is fundamental in order to allow students to stay in class and stay well in class. Please, Franz.
Thank you, Maria Rita. Good morning, everyone. So I'm Frans van Assen from the University of Belgium, Leuven in Belgium. And, well, I'm semi-retired there. It means I'm trying to retire. So I'm going to talk about inclusive education and well-being. Because, let's say, this project is part of the Erasmus Plus program, a key action there about inclusive education. So it means, of course, that we have to relate to that. And the first question is, what people are we talking about? What young people are we talking about? So I'm using here a definition or a list of people coming from DG Eeg, Education and Culture, a directorate of the European Commission of 2014. And you see here the people that we have to care about. Those are people with disabilities, health problems, educational difficulties, cultural differences like immigrants, refugees, and so on, economic obstacles, social obstacles, like discrimination, and geographical obstacles, like that schools are in rural areas, and so on. Let us then look at what the European Agency for Special Needs and Inclusive Education is saying, also an agency of the European Commission in 2018. And how they define inclusive education is that all the people that we have actually seen with disabilities and so on, they should be able to follow education like anyone else. So inclusive education, according to this Agency for Special Needs and Inclusive Education, is understood as a provision of high-quality education in schools that value the rights, equality, access, and participation of all learners. So it means that all those people with disabilities, with learning difficulties and so on must have access, equal access to education. And while social inclusion is of course a goal of inclusive education, it is a little bit different. So how the same agency defines it is that social inclusion is mainly about social interaction and community participation in areas of education, but also employment and living in the community. So it's more about the whole of the society. Yeah? But inclusive education is, of course, intended to be fostering social inclusion. Later in the day, my colleagues will speak more about why this is important, going into cost benefits and so on. Now, there are different ways or different ways of educating, and here is an example of education with exclusion. It means in the middle you have the regular education, but a number of people are excluded. It can be, for instance, Roma, but not everyone has access to, for instance, high-quality education like Eton in the UK and so on. So not everyone has access to that. So people are excluded, or it could also be, for instance, in when people have health problems. Nowadays it's easier with the use of ICT that people can still participate, but it is quite still a problem that sick people don't have access to education. Then, let's say the evolution of that was to have education organized, of course, from an economic point, most effectively or efficiently. Let's say we have the regular education, and then we make special schools for those people with special needs. And this is known as segregated education. While this had quite a number of disadvantages, one was thinking, well, let's go to a more integrated approach, and let's integrate all those people in the same educational system. However, how that has been implemented, unfortunately, is often a one-way assimilation, that the students, the pupils, have to conform to the existing system. They have to adapt. While inclusive education starts from the same premise, in the sense that, okay, we want to include everyone, but there the idea is actually that we leave them more with their talents and so on, but the intention is more to let them shine, to let them thrive. Yeah? So this is actually what we want to achieve with inclusive education. It's quite very ambitious, and our thesis there is then that inclusive education is next to impossible without well-being. And this is what we will elaborate in a few slides more. Now, if we are looking at well-being itself, there are many definitions of well-being. It even goes to climate change and so on. But we want to focus on the well-being as it is of use in the field of education. And here we are using the model of Dodge and other people that consider well-being essentially as a balance between challenges and resources. And Dodge defined that in terms of psychological, social, physical challenges and psychological, social, and physical resources that people have. When we apply this to education, we get the following. So the challenges that are typically posed there are educational objectives. And typically, well, you can read the literature about that. You will find that in Bloom, Cradwell, Massia, and Dave. They are actually dealing with the cognitive objectives, affective and psychomotoric objectives of education. For instance, in vocational education and training, people need to learn how to bake or how to work with metal, and so on. And on the other hand, on the resource side, you have the talents, of course, of the students, of the pupils, which might be different for each individual. But there you have also acquired skills during education. And you see that while people are being educated and learn, the challenges are increased in terms of cognitive, affective, and psychomotoric, but also the resources are increased. So one keeps there the balance. This is the ideal. However, when we go to inclusive education and we bring in here the people that we have been concerned with, people with disabilities, health problems, educational difficulties, cultural difference, and so on, you see here that the challenges are for the student, for the pupil, are actually much bigger than the usual educational challenges that a pupil would have. And this creates a certain imbalance. This is one thing. The other thing is that less resources of the student itself can be used for educational purposes, for educational objectives. Because those students have to deal with all the challenges, like, for instance, discrimination and other things, physical disabilities, and so on. Now, the problem is compounded if we don't take care of well-being. So there we will see, for instance, if one is not really taking care of well-being, you will have students with anxiety. Bullying will be there. There will be poor motivation, discrimination, injustice. And you see, the problem is really compounded. Not only those students have less opportunities, but they even have more challenges in terms of well-being. And it has been shown in literature that certain, let's say, the fewer opportunities, like, for instance, coming from a lower income, leads to those kinds of well-being challenges. Now, to illustrate that, I've taken here a few examples from an OECD report of students' well-being. And this is more than, well, it's about 530 pages, the report of well-being from the OECD. But it gives you a few examples. For instance, PISA 2015, PISA are the reference studies from OECD that every Ministry of Education is anxious to get, or get anxiety to get it sometimes. And it shows that anxiety about schoolwork, homework and tests is negatively related to performance in science, mathematics and reading. It also says, for instance, disadvantaged students have less motivation to achieve than advantaged students do. And students who are amongst the most motivated score 38 points higher in science and so on. And 38 points higher in science, it means a full year of science education that they are losing. Students across OECD countries who reported that they feel like an outsider score again 20 points lower in science. Schools where the incidence of bullying is high by international standards score 47 points lower. So it's more than a year that they are losing. Yeah. So what we need to do is really get rid of those well-being challenges and replace it on the other side of the balance with well-being resources, such as respect, tolerance, care, empathy, non-discrimination, good learner-teacher, good learner-parent relationships. Again, in this well-being report of the OECD, it is very clear that the relationship between learner and teacher and learner and parents is very important and very effective. So how does TM fit into this? Now, TM is actually working on the different levels. So it is reducing the challenges, it's reducing bullying, for instance, in school. It's increasing the resources. Like, for instance, it would improve the relationship between teacher and students. And TM has also a secret weapon. And that is, as you can see, it puts springs under the balance. And every day, when one is meditating twice, it brings you back in balance. And this has the effect, actually, that not only it brings you in balance, but the quality of TM is that it's a self-balancing technique. So it's not really dependent on external interventions that everyone has to do and so on. It's self-balancing. And another important thing is it's going beyond the intellect. It's not explaining what caring and empathy and tolerance is. It is actually transforming the students to become tolerant, which is quite different. So in conclusion, we can say inclusive education is next to impossible without well-being, and QTTM is actually a technique that will fulfill those promises. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Franz, for this precious contribution. At the beginning, I said that this first part is more related to a project as a system, and it's very important to define better where we are and how the project action fits with the objectives that you would like to achieve through the actions that you would like to pose into practice. And so this framework is very important, other than the analysis that we did in the different local context where the project was implemented. So this is the general context, the framework through which we went through with our actions. And I would like to invite two strategic people, the leaders of the implementation, because of course the context is very important. Now we have to act. And I would like to give the floor to Mirta Castellaro and Stefano Mancin, who took care of the coordination of all the implementations in all the countries involved in the project. Please. Yes, a big clap to them.
Very, very much. I was planning to thank people at the end, but standing here and seeing all of you here, I cannot resist. Because here we have really full hall with people that came from very far, from Iceland to Czech Republic to Romania to Spain, people beside the parents from UK, from all the countries, obviously in our partnership but beyond. So I really would like to thank you for coming and for participating especially in the project. So we just want to give a just general overview on of the impact and the results of the project, the Friends project. The Friends project as such was implementing in 4 main countries, and are Portugal, UK, Belgium, and Italy. These are the partners of the project. And actually, it involved in the whole countries more than 1,350 students in the training, more than 700 teachers, and more than 300 parents. And this means that basically in the 4 implementing countries, there were the involvement of more than 30 clusters of schools and schools, involving also an expansion with some organization working with migrants and with prisons. And so we could say that actually, if we look at the overall implementation, one common feature in all countries was a great predominance, a great participation of primary schools. There were many children learning, and so this was very interesting and overall the countries. But we wanted to go a little bit more on some specific feature in the implementation of the different countries. So if we look at Portugal, that has already was participating in the Europe project that Maria Rita mentioned before, there was a huge expansion of the implementation in the whole territory of Portugal. All the little stars are schools and cluster of schools. And it's been quite strong in Algarve region in the south, but also in the Lisbon area, in the north of Portugal, also reaching the island of Madeira. And we were thinking there are few features that can explain this huge expansion in Portugal. One is that it was, again, participating in the Europe project before, so this was the occasion to consolidate and to take advantage of the momentum of that implementation. The other one is that there were 4 very important partners, public and private, in the project that have been working in a team very closely, that have been the University of Algarve, that was leader of the evaluation, the Parents Association of Aveiro, and then the Teacher Training Center of Loule. The Teacher Training Centers are public structure connected with the Directorate General of Education of the Ministry of Education of Portugal, and that offers professional training to the teachers, school teachers, and obviously the organization that was implementing Transcendental Meditation in Portugal. The organization responsible for implementation of Transcendental Meditation in Portugal. And these 4 partners working together as a team have been really crucial in the richness for Portugal and for the whole project. The other reason for the success of this expansion could be also the synergy with other programs. With some school in the project was already part of a national program of the Ministry for educational territory for intervention priority in English. It means for schools that are in disadvantaged territory. And so this gave a great visibility to our program at national level in Portugal, and also the participation. The school were part also often of the UNESCO schools, and our project was presented various times by our team in UNESCO regional or national meeting, from Faro to Lisbon to Porto to recently to Madeira. Another very important feature that promoted this was the constant interaction with the DGA, with the Directorate General. We have often their visits, sometime in our partner meeting, in our conferences. We really want to thank Dr. Nadia Ferreira for being with us today and also for speaking at the conference. And also another aspect is this the flexibility law that was launched recently by the Ministry of Education of Portugal, that allows a certain autonomy in the curriculum to the school. This allowed and facilitated very much implementation of our program, Quiet Time with Transcendental Meditation, and also allowed some experiment where we have maybe an entire class having the program with also more advanced instruction, more advanced technique. And then also coming back to the Teacher Training Center, he had a very strong role in coordinating, in inspiring and coordinating many other teacher training centers in the whole Portugal. So we had two teacher training centers from Algarve and also from Lisbona and the north participating. And a special feature has been that the training in Transcendental Meditation and Quiet Time has been given in Portugal from the Teacher Training Center as a training accredited to the career of teachers. So all the teachers that have been formed in Portugal, trained in our program, has been through this center. And this also, we have to consider that our program is a whole school approach, so that involves all components of schools. And it has a systematic approach. So we start with the principal and then the teachers. So those teachers that have been trained are always also the seeds for new implementation in new schools. So this was a kind of, we could say, multiplier. Also, the Teacher Training Center of Lolé organized in coordination with the partner that teaches Transcendental Meditation, the first face-to-face regional meeting of all the teachers that were implementing in different schools of Algarve this program. And this was a real, very inspiring and event. And also I want to emphasize again the role of the Parent Association that actually inspired new parent association. Like we will see here, we will have the experience of one parent from the school in Quarteira in Algarve, and also a message from the director of the Parent Association in Olhão, in the Algarve. Our partner Parents Association is from Apeja. And there is, we feel really that the parents have a leading role in this moment in promoting and inspiring innovation in education, and also have a precious role because parents will follow the children through their path in the training, from a school to this following school. And this could be accompanying and a guarantee for having the program expanding to the following level of education. So this was some thought about about some element that really speed up the expansion in Portugal. Then going to UK, especially a very interesting feature of the implementation in UK was the involvement of the so-called alternative provision schools. These are schools in which actually the students that have been for any reason excluded by the mainstream school are going. And the objective actually of this school is to just as soon as possible prepare the students so that he could come back again in the mainstream school. So this is a particular feature of the educational system in the United Kingdom that require particular attention, especially for the teachers. There is much higher proportion of teachers in these schools than students. It's quite a stressful job, and actually teachers are one of the targets of our project. And so was given in UK very big attention to them, and we will hear later the experiences, a video with the experience of the principal and teachers of those schools. And also another interesting expansion element in new fields. In UK, there have been, with sport, recently there have been also connection with the organization that work and use sport also for inclusion. And there have been a meeting and possible training. So combining Quiet Time Transcendental Meditation with sport. Going to Italy, We had that partner, a municipality in Italy, that brought the involvement also. We will see a presentation, the municipality of Sacile, of the youth council in the project. And also a special feature for expansion has been in prison. We will see in the project, in the second part, a very moving video about prisons. Actually, this expansion was possible through a private grant, also an additional private grants, but there was a synergy between the Friends project and this other grant, because the Friends also supported, inspired, supported, and also provided the test for the research for the prisoners. So we will see also the result of the research. And then in Belgium, beside primary school in the Flemish side of Belgium, in the Flanders, and also in the French part, there has been a very interesting expansion, participation of a migrant organization offering shelter to migrants. They not only participated to our project with the training of the staff and of migrants, but also had the idea to apply for a new grant to the EU Solidarity Corps to organize meeting moment for migrants and young people, in which to offer, through also the synergy with the Friends project, the Transcendental Meditation, and possibility also to practice together a moment of following up. So this was about a little bit the implementation and the expansion in new sector, the potential expansion for future in new sector. There was also doing project expansion in new country. We had projects starting in school in Spain that actually is a partner in the project, but was not a partner for implementation, through the work of our partner at Sofia and of the TM organization in Spain. So he started the school in implementation in school, also in Germany. We had an expansion in Ireland, not only for school, but also with a connection between House of Colour, the organization for migrants, and some international organization for people that has been unjustly treated by justice, so put in prison but innocent. And then expansion also in Iceland, and in Romania we had an incredible conference just a few weeks ago with the participation of 200 people, in which the whole team of Portugal went to present the project, the Friends project, including a team including principal, the university teacher, the teachers of the school, the students. So, and I think this also gave development. I see all of them here in the hall, so we hope really that we can hear more in the part of the discussion of the conference about their experience. And so I want to also mention another that we felt was a very enriching aspect of this, and peculiar of this project, is this meeting together, this international face-to-face meeting of local learning communities. So I said that we had a regional one in Algarve, but we organized conference in occasion of our partner meetings in Lisbon and also in UK. And this was the occasion from participant from a country to go to another country, and also to reinforce the national communities. So people was traveling from all Portugal to come to Lisbon, participating teachers and students, and also in UK, maybe from Sweden. So this meeting together really creates community, really creates exchange of experience, growing together, reinforce the inspiration. Inspiration is a great value. They discover more and more in education and in the learning. So, and it makes us grow as a community together. And to add to this, we had also 2 Zoom connections where the students of different schools in different countries were together connecting to meditate together. So I just wanted to give the frame where you could see a little bit. We wanted to give the frame all the experience of the people that will be speaking, especially in the second part. And I want to just, we want as implementation coordinator to really thank all the incredible implementation team that have been working in Portugal, in Italy, in UK, in Belgium. Many are present here. with great commitment and professionality, and all the principals and teachers that participate and students, we know how busy our schools, and their commitment to the program and to wanting to try, to want to implement this innovation. It shows their love for their work and their students, and I think we really thank them, and this is the community that could be really the nucleus for creating an alliance for inclusive schools. So, thank you.
Really, thank you very much. Then, as Mirta said, we will see the life of the schools where we implemented the project. But what about the approach? What about the method? I would like to invite Professor Ashley Dean, Professor of Education and Physics at Maraishi University of Management in the USA. And he will speak about the Quiet Time with Transcendental Meditation program for education, giving us also advices about studies and researches on the approach, on the method, and the relation between the method and the well-being, the context. Now, this is the topic and the implementation that Mirta just said, so to have an overview, a frame of the overall project. Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and welcome everyone. It's very fulfilling to be here today to see so many faces, because when this first project, the Europe project, started, there weren't really any schools in Europe, public schools, that were using this program. A couple of private schools, and now it's, as you've seen, it's expanding very rapidly. So what I'd like to do now is to explain, firstly, what is Transcendental Meditation in the context of a Quiet Time program. Secondly, why is it so effective? Why does it work? How is it possible that students can do this and flourish with it and enjoy it? And then I'd like to talk about the effects of this program on the neurophysiology, how it develops the coherent functioning of the brain, and how that in turn affects the behavior and academic performance of the students. Because ultimately, everything we do depends on the functioning of our brain. So, first thing is, what is Transcendental Meditation? Here is one of the participating schools in Portugal. So Transcendental Meditation is unlike any other form of meditation that you may have heard about. It does not involve concentration, because if it did, many students would not be able to do it, as you would know from your own experience. And it does not involve contemplation. It doesn't involve thinking about something. It's called Transcendental Meditation because it involves a process of transcending. Transcending what? Transcending thought. So if you think of the mind as being like an ocean, on the surface level of the ocean, you have waves all the time, just like when you're sitting there now, you're having thoughts all the time. But if you can allow the ocean to settle down, you can realize there's a state of the ocean where there are no waves, but you still have the ocean. And so that's what Transcendental Meditation does, provides a very simple, natural method to allow the mind to settle down so that you have an experience of being conscious, but completely silent and completely awake. So we could say that Transcendental Meditation produces the complete settling of the mind, experience of a state of inner silence. And that experience has been missing from education for thousands of years, because I remember being in school and there was never any silence. Even if the teacher told you to be quiet, most people didn't comply with that. So this experience is fundamental, and you can see the students are enjoying their meditation. So let's look at education from a simple perspective. We could say that there are three components. There's the knower, there's the process of knowing, and then there is the known. And today in education, humankind has never been better at delivering known. You can imagine how much the amount of human knowledge is doubling now about every 18 months. And being educated has been likened to trying to drink from a fire hose. Some of the water goes in your mouth, but most of it goes rushing by you. And this is a very stressful experience for students, because fundamentally when they're born, they want to know everything. And suddenly they begin to realize that they can only know a tiny fraction of the totality of knowledge. And when that fundamental goal of your life is not fulfilled, that is inherently stressful. So students in schools are very stressed today, which is a pity, as we'll see. So what's missing from education is not the known, we've got lots of known, but the knowledge of the knower. What we need to do as the amount of information expands, we need to expand the container of knowledge. And what that means is developing the total potential of the brain and allowing the student to develop their innate qualities of creativity and intelligence and compassion and breadth of comprehension and all the qualities that make a great student. Because we saw from Dr. Van Asch that certain systems of education have been developed where you include students, you exclude students, but what they're really realizing is that what's missing is the development of the full potential of every student. That's what's been missing in education. So we'll talk about how that can be done. Now, I've just mentioned that education is inherently stressful, and these single photon emission computer tomography scans from Daniel Amen's lab at the University of California show what happens when you have a brain that is functioning optimally. You have blood flow covering basically every area of the brain. But when the brain is stressed, then through any outside problem like being chased by a tiger, your brain will be stressed, but what happens to the brain then could save your life. It's called the fight or flight response. But you get the same response when you sit down to take an exam, or if you're going to a very important meeting and you're stuck in a traffic jam, you'll also have the fight or flight response. So everything you do changes your brain. So when you're in a stressful situation, it changes your brain. You see here in the prefrontal cortex, now the blood has drained out of the brain, and the brain is a very fluid organ. It's like a river, not like a rock. Every time you do something, it changes your brain, but if you keep doing something over and over again, it begins to change your brain on a permanent basis. That's why tennis players spend 8 hours a day on a tennis court. They're training their brain by doing repetitive action in order to become a better tennis player. But you don't want to have a brain like this, because the prefrontal cortex is the area of the brain that is responsible for the higher human values. So here is, if we're saying if stress damages the brain, we need an antidote for stress. Here's the prefrontal cortex. This is the thinking brain. And here is the back of the brain, we could say, which is the impulsive brain, the animal brain. So every one of us, we have very many of our brain parts that are common with animals. So if you look at a cow, you see a cow has a cerebellum, just like we do. A cow has a visual cortex, it has a motor cortex, it has auditory cortex. So a cow has that. So what is the difference between me, let's say, and a cow? I mean, cow is better looking, but that's the very superficial way of looking at it. The cow does not have the fully developed prefrontal cortex that a human being has. So we see in the prefrontal cortex all of the things that we really would like to develop in students. For example, impulse control. You'll see that little children don't have impulse control. If one child comes to school with an iPhone, everybody wants the iPhone. And you know that this prefrontal cortex doesn't really fully develop until 25 years old. That's why car insurance is so much more expensive for an 18-year-old than a 25-year-old. So the prefrontal cortex is what allows us to be able to function in a social way without upsetting other people. Long-term planning. You know, you've never seen a cow packing a suitcase and planning a holiday. You you don't see that. That's a human function. So again, we want long-term planning. The ability to concentrate is located here. Emotional stability, learning ability, ethical thinking, moral reasoning, all of these higher human values. So if education does not develop the whole brain, you can end up with human beings who behave inhumanely. And that's been the tragedy of the last few thousand years. We're not actually fully developed if we don't have all of these qualities. So what does Transcendental Meditation do? Well, it gives the experience, as I mentioned before, of inner silence. And it turns out that that's the one thing that's been missing from education that will allow us to fully develop the prefrontal cortex. So here we see Dr. Fred Travis at the Institute for Brain, Consciousness and Cognition at Monash University of Management. And what he's looking at here is, this is an electroencephalograph, he's looking at the brain waves. And we see here, this is looking at what's called alpha coherence. So everybody's heard of alpha waves, 8 to 12 cycles per second. Well, what we're looking at here is the degree of coherence or communication between different areas of the brain at alpha frequencies. This is just sitting with eyes open. You see there isn't much coherence, really. This is with eyes closed. And again, it's not very different, but this is after about 10 to 15 seconds of transcendental meditation. You see, the whole brain becomes coherent. It's functioning now holistically, and you'll notice that the prefrontal cortex is now having strengthened connections to the animal part of the brain. The prefrontal cortex you can look upon as the chief executive officer of the brain, the CEO, and now the CEO is beginning to actually govern the brain, which means the human part of the brain is taking over. Also, you see this connection between the left side of the brain, generally associated with mathematical and analytical skills, and the right side of the brain associated with communication and with artistic skills. So anyone here who's a teacher, you know that you've seen students who are brilliant at mathematics, left brain function, but not very good at communicating with people. And you've seen many, many more students who are brilliant at communicating with people on social media, but they may not be very good at mathematics. So what you're seeing here is a balanced outcome, where the student who is not so good at mathematics becomes better at mathematics, and the student who is not so good at communicating becomes better at communicating. So you're beginning to develop fully developed, grounded human beings. So what we're looking at here, this is the left side of the prefrontal cortex, looking at the raw electrical signal. And then here we have the right side of the cerebral cortex and the prefrontal cortex. And now the person is just sitting with their eyes closed. And then you see that this signal here is looking at the left side, and this is the right side of the brain. And when we say local coherence, we mean that the neurons in this vicinity are functioning basically randomly, and here we see the coherence between the left side of the brain and the right side of the brain. You see it goes up and it goes down. So coherence can go from 0% coherence to 100% coherence. And then the individual is given the instruction to begin the practice of transcendental meditations, and then you see immediately here the local coherence goes up, meaning that the neurons in the vicinity of that electrode are now firing together coherently on the left side. Here they are firing coherently together on the right side. And the interesting thing is when you look at the coherence between the left side of the brain and the right side of the brain, you see as soon as they started the technique, the coherence goes up above 95% and stabilizes out at a very, very high level. So now you're seeing that global EEG coherence. Here we're only looking at 2 leads of the electroencephalograph, but this is happening over the whole brain, as I showed you earlier. And this is transformative because, as I said earlier, everything you do changes your brain. So if you're practicing transcendental meditation twice a day, regularly, then that will not only create coherence during meditation, but outside of meditation, the coherence begins to grow as well as part of your daily life. So what's happening then is that the whole brain is functioning coherently, and that will affect your activity. Now you may ask, why does the experience of silence produce this global coherence? And we can take here an example. This is the most objective science. I mean, unless you want to object to that, which you can. But I mean, most people think physics is pretty soulless. You know, it's objective. It's all about matter. And consciousness is thought today to be basically subjective, although we'll see in a minute it isn't only subjective. So what happens in nature? Science begins because people wanted repeatable knowledge. You begin to delve deeper into the structure of nature, and surprise, surprise, you find that nature is structured in layers of existence. So the surface level is what we're seeing now with our eyes, but if you could be like Alice in Wonderland and shrink yourself down, if you got to the molecular level, this room would look completely different. And that's the layer where there are laws of nature that govern molecules. And then if you shrank yourself down even more, you come to the atomic level, which again looks completely different to the molecular level, with different laws of nature. And then as you go deeper, you get to the nuclear level with completely different laws of nature. But notice, as you're going to finer levels of nature, nature's becoming inherently more powerful. It's becoming inherently concentrated in knowledge and information and organizing power, because obviously the nuclear level contains within it the knowledge of the more superficial levels. And in physics today, all the theoretical physicists are working harder and harder to try to fathom the level of unity to nature. As you know, the CERN nuclear accelerator has found that at deeper levels, electromagnetism and the weak force are unified together. And as you go deeper, the theorists tell us that all these different diverse parts of nature spring from one single field, a unified field, which contains within it all the knowledge of all the laws of nature. So that's physics. But then if we go to consciousness, which is a completely different way of looking at the universe, the surface level of consciousness, you have these waves, as I mentioned, thoughts on the surface of the mind. But Transcendental Meditation allows the mind to settle down effortlessly to quieter, more subtle, more abstract, more powerful levels of thinking until we transcend thought and we experience that field of pure silence, pure consciousness at the source of thought. And theoretical physicists are working today on the structure of the unified field together with the structure of consciousness, beginning to realize that nature really is unified, that the objective and subjective streams of knowledge fundamentally are unified at their most fundamental level. So this is the interdisciplinary foundation to education. So the research shows so far that only the experience of transcendental consciousness enlivens total brain functioning. And this is, again, as I said, the tragedy of education, that we miss the one thing that develops the whole brain. We're all expert in education at giving the students history and mathematics and science and art and sports, all developing parts of the brain. But ironically, it's the experience of silence that enlivens the whole brain. So here we see that experience of silence gives high brain coherence, and then high brain coherence is correlated with all of these qualities that we want to develop in our students. So moral reasoning is correlated with high coherence, creativity, inner orientation, decreased anxiety, academic performance increases as EEG coherence goes up, self-awareness, computational efficiency, intelligence, decreased neuroticism, emotional stability, concept learning. So the thing is, to be able to increase the coherence of the brain, it's like pulling the legs of a table. You increase the coherence of the brain, and then everything else comes together for you. So these are all very important qualities, obviously, for social inclusion. As we were saying, as Dr. Van Asch was saying, decreased anxiety is something you want. Increased academic performance will help to create well-being and inclusion. You could say intelligence in addition, and emotional stability, and moral reasoning, etc. So I'll just give you a couple of examples. This is earlier research from the Permanente Journal in the United States. This is showing what happens after 4 months of transcendental meditation for teachers. So this is the control group, this is the TM group, highly statistically significant reduction in teacher burnout, and that research has been duplicated by the Friends project. So you'll see that. So poor old teachers, you know, they exclude themselves from school by record numbers dropping out of school. New teachers are dropping out of school. Older teachers are taking stress leave, etc. And then with the students, this is from the Visitation Valley Middle School in the United States in San Francisco. This study published in the journal Education looked at the lowest performing groups on mathematics. And again, after 4 months, they found that about 40% of the students in the TM group had improved by at least one level of performance on mathematics, compared to 15% in the control group. So if you're a mathematics teacher, this is really the answer to your prayers, because you know how frustrating it is trying to teach children who don't like mathematics. But now when the brain is more coherent, lo and behold, it makes sense, the child becomes more able to understand abstract concepts, which is really an ability you need to have for mathematics. English achievement, these are students who are not from, not born in the United States to English-speaking families. Their improvement is in language skills, basically the same thing as we saw in the previous slide. Now, in terms of behavior, this is looking at, again, this middle school, Visitation Valley, reduction in suspension rates. So before the TM program began in the school, about 30% of the students were being suspended from school every year. And you can imagine the nightmare of teaching in an environment because it's a violent environment, bullying and fighting. And you see over a period of 3 years that there's a 79% reduction in suspension rate. So now it's considered one of the safest schools in San Francisco. Blue is the average for San Francisco. And you see here, looking specifically at violence, this high school, they introduced Transcendental Meditation. Now the violence is going down for fighting, and referrals for expulsion have gone down to 0. So it also affects behavior, so academic performance and behavior. So now all over the world, this is in the United Kingdom, this is the Maharishi School in Skelmersdale, students are practicing Transcendental Meditation. The environment at the school is improving. Academic performance is improving. In fact, in 2002, this school in the suburbs of Liverpool got better grades on GCSE than Eton. So you might think what that means. And also their moral development was improving. You think what that means. So it's a very important breakthrough in education, and we're very proud to have been sponsored by the European Union to implement this throughout Europe. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ashley. And in a project, it's very important to involve stakeholders, because a project is finished. All the project will finish, and our project is going to be over in 1 month. And so it's very important to create networks, as Mirta said, and to involve public authorities since the beginning. And I would like to invite Nadia Ferreira, who can give us a view about how stakeholders can support projects, and in particular this project in Portugal. And Nadia Ferreira is a member of monitoring team and curriculum development monitoring team of the Directorate General for Education in Portugal. Thank you very much again for being here with us.
Thank you. Greetings from Portugal. We are very happy to be invited to be here. The question that you make me was how to make possible innovation in public educational system. So this is being a journey. It's not a point. In Portugal, we have a centralized and developed school management, political and religious neutrality, free education, and state and private kindergarten schools, and compulsory education from 6 to 19 years old. Our priorities are to provide a common general background education, school for all, to promote an educational culture of excellence, and to improve schools' success and the quality of education. How can we do it? In the last years, we are dropping early drop rates in Portugal, if you can see that. And in the PISA of 2015, we get our best results. And so we are getting better. And now in 2018, we decreased a little bit, but in the statistical way of viewing things, we are stabilized. So we are good, but we want to be great. And so we have different programs in Portugal that were implemented and not finished. So we implement a program and we continue, and then we need another program and so on. And this is what I will present to you. So first, our profile for the end of the compulsory schooling. This is our profile to a Portuguese student with 18 years old. And you can see that we have well-being, health, and environment has main competence to develop. And we have interpersonal relationships, has developing social and emotional competence. And this is what we want to our students in Portugal. So it's a big goal. We have taped the program that you are talking about from 1996 to this moment. And it's a program to schools in very vulnerable territories. So schools in priority intervention territories is like we say, we need priority political intervention in these schools. And we have that number of schools involved in the network. And that's why your practice was more powerful in Portugal, because these schools talk about what they do. And they bring teachers to tell stories about their practice. And narratives are very strong in the community of teachers. So when the teacher said, I did that, and my students react like this, and so on, the other teacher can understand what he's saying. If Nadia, as Minister of Education, said that, it's not the same. So we don't tell or teach. We pick teachers and they teach each other. They tell stories about their practices. And this way of doing things was used in the pilot project that we developed with 6 schools. And we said to that 6 schools, you can do whatever you want. You can take away all the laws of education in Portugal and do a new school. And so in this, and with the same resources, and the students have to become that kind of student, and they have to become 0 drops in the end of 3 years. So this was the challenge that we made to 6 schools. And they made a new school. And these 6 new schools were somehow righted in the law of Portugal, and now we have 2,035 schools doing new schools, and in the last years we have all the schools doing new schools. So TAPE program aims to improve school achievement and quality and prevent early school leaving because it's in vulnerable territories, and we invite schools to strengthen the relations between school, families, and communities. We have this way of doing things in TAPE program. Cycles of improvement are needed. So we are always asking, what is your problem? What you are doing for solve this problem? What your evidence? Do you solve the problem? We ask, we listen, and we ask, and we listen. We, Minister of Education. And schools have this culture of asking ourselves, what is my problem? How can I solve it? Implement, study the achievements, and ask ourselves again, my problem is solved or I have a new problem. And so the idea is prevention, stability, and sustainability, because he have to be solutions with impact. So we have to see that a long way. So this is the culture of schools that are in the program. And then the 6 schools that we say, well, you don't have laws for you. And the idea is that these schools do innovation, and they do innovation because we understand that innovation is locally defined. I have a problem locally, I seek for a solution, I have increased value with this solution, yes, and then we have innovation. And if I have a new thing in my school, I have to tell others that solves my problem. And so we began working with several schools. And they can change everything. They can change how school organize classes and groups. They change work time of each subject, school calendar. They change curriculum subject. They put new contents on the curriculum. They change approach. They personalize curricula. They teachers work differently. The leaders, management, resources differently. And, for example, they bring new approaches as you come with this project. With this innovation from 6 schools, we go to a bigger project. So we are now working with all schools, from private and public school, and we are giving them autonomy. Autonomy to do better. To do better because we have these results, and we think that the general political response is not enough. So now we have to give schools the opportunity to create micro-political solutions. So now the schools know the students, they know the problem, they have to engage in new solutions. And each student, it's different. So thank you for the first speaker that defined inclusion, because in Portugal, inclusion is all people are different, all people are potential, and all people have difficulties. So we are all different. We have to give them different responses because they are different. So what is flexibility for us? It's different approaches to different persons. And we do that by approaches of time of learning, of spaces learning, of practice of evaluation, and integrating content. So in this moment, Portugal have one school, one project, not a school, one kind of school in Portugal. So why we are successful? Because Portugal works in networks. All the organisms of the Ministry of Education work together. When we go to a school, we go together. So I am from part of the ministry that works with pedagogy, and we have a part of the ministry that works with resources, and then we have another organism to work like inspection and so on. So we go as a team, a multidisciplinary team, and we work with schools. So the Ministry of Education is a network. Then we go to schools, clusters, and we communicate with schools, and we listen and ask questions. And then they connect each other and ask questions each other and listen each other. Sometimes we group some schools and they work together in the network, more closed. For example, your network or a region network. And then we introduce another kind of schools in the network to bring diversity. And for example, we have professional schools or private schools that connect with our network of public schools. And then we have the university as critical friends that ask hard questions and seek for evidence of the solution of the schools and write papers about it and so on. And then they have networks between them because we reunite that people to ask them how schools are doing things and to understand how can we support better. And then they communicate with us and they work with a network inside clusters. So the clusters are networks, micro networks or larger networks. For example, networks in the community or between students and families or other kind of people that works in the community. So we have all common aims: promote educational inclusion and educational success, prevent dropout, improve the learning outcomes and promote quality, reduce indiscipline. To do that, with some schools, we ask for strategic improvement plans, ask for biannual reports and follow-up meetings, focus group. And to all schools in Portugal, we have meetings, regional, national, and with workshops to improve practice. Coordinating meetings is our role, and we have a lot of communication from blogs, Facebook, official website to engage people in communication with lots of video of practices. So, one last idea. So, we can see us as Portugal a network of networks. And we have schools that are not. They are in different networks, and we, in this moment, have a lesson learned. A school that is in many networks is stronger, more mature, and more able to innovate. So how can we do that? As a Minister of Education, we support schools. We keep simple, with no paperwork. We are near of people, support them, respect autonomy, promote reflection and challenge, and support exchange of practice, and do networking. Thank you.
I would like to invite Professor Sergio Vieira, Alexandra Gomez for the University of Algarve, Chiara Ruini from the University of Bologna, Annette Lindert from a Leader, which is a society which expertises the research on education. And their intervention is about TM and quiet time as a perspective for fostering inclusive education, and the evaluation of the project results in Italy, UK, Belgium, and Portugal. Thank you very much, Sergio.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you. Before I present you the conclusion and some results, it's the time to say something. It's the time to say thank you, Mirta, thank you, Stefano, thank you, Paulo, for this opportunity, for this challenge. It's time to say thank you for your support at the beginning at this project. Raymond, thank you for your collaboration. Thank you, Franz, Richard, Ashley, for your words, for your reflections with us. And thank you for all, because we are all psychologists. So thank you for your confidence with us. We represent different fields: clinical psychology, education psychology, organizational psychology, health and social psychology, and different institutions. The first, for today, the aims, it's essentially to present you some results in different groups. The impact of the principal psychological measures in the teachers and staff, in the children between 5 and 11 years old, and adolescent. For this evaluation, we use same methodology in each country, qualitative and quantitative assessment. In particular, for the quantitative studies, you use a longitudinal approach with different measures, each measure adapted for each country. And you assess before and after learning the TM or quiet time program. And in general, you use the different time of 12 weeks, sometimes 1 week more, but in median 12 weeks. At the level of the dimension, you assess different dimensions. For example, in the group of the teachers and staff, we assess job satisfaction, anxiety, burnout, positive and negative effect, life satisfaction, motivation, vitality, stress, and psychological well-being. In the group of the children between 5-11 years old, strength difficulties in 2 different measures, and in the adolescent, resilience and anxiety.
I was hoping Sergio forgot and continue my part of the presentation. Let me see how this works, okay? Like this, okay. So for teachers, we had a longitudinal sample with 218 teachers that were measured in 2 periods of time, before and after learning and practicing TM. They had a mean age of 46 years, minimum 22 and maximum 64. We had a great majority of women, comparing to 14% of men. And teachers came mainly from Portugal, and then UK and Italy in a similar way, and for the last, Belgium. These were the general results that we can show you as more objectively possible. As you can see, the green exemplifies that everything has results that are different from the starting point, and it goes in the way that we expected them to go. The general job satisfaction increased, emotional exhaustion, depersonalization decreased, personal accomplishment increased, intrinsic motivation increased, the perceived stress decreased, satisfaction with life, positive effects are better, and the balance is also better. Negative effects are less negative effects. The anxiety decreased, and the subjective well-being increased. We can show you more particularly less emotional hardening and more connection with others, and more feelings of competence and successful achievement in work. Also, we have less perceived stress and lower levels of trait anxiety. For instance, I feel inadequate. These kind of feelings decreased in our sample. Also, we try to find a measure of subjective well-being that is found by adding up to the balance between positive and negative effects, the satisfaction with life, and we can see that there is a more positive evaluation of one's life. Here in Portugal, it's a matter of speaking. We can also say, because we measured psychological well-being in 2 of the dimensions, purpose in life on the left in blue, and self-acceptance in green, you can see that both grow significantly. You can say that purpose in life is a sense of purpose and realization, and self-acceptance is a positive attitude toward the self, towards me, including good and bad qualities. And we can also see that subjective vitality increased significantly for those who practice TM. So now I'm passing on to Annette to present children's.
I will present you the part of the children, the total sample of the 5 till 11 years old is 167. They also had a T1 and a T2 moment for the meditation implementation. The average age is 8.23, and the gender is mostly females, 93 and 64 males, and 10 are not identified for some reason. Yeah. The Portuguese sample is 31 students, and 82 of Belgians, and 54 of Italian participants. We had the following questionnaires. From the strength and difficulty questionnaires, we have the emotional symptoms, the conduct problems, a sort of aggression problems, hyperactivity, peer relationship problems, and pro-social behavior, total difficulties, and the combination of that is internal symptoms and external symptoms. And we had the DESA Mini for small children, social and emotional learning. And as you can see, The emotional symptoms were going down, and that's the way we expected it. And also the conduct problems, so the problems with aggression or something like that, is also going down after 3 months of meditation, and also the hyperactivity. And so we can say the total difficulties, internal symptoms and external symptoms, were going down. So that's the way we expected it. It's good results. To deepen in the analysis, we looked for the pro-social behavior, and we found that there's a lot of less selfish behavior among the students. This one is for the first, it's a higher selfish behavior, and the second is lower. And less disruptive behavior is also the same. T1, this is the first, before meditating, it was much higher than after meditating. So it's good results. Then for the older children from 12 to 11 years old, we have a total sample of 21 children from Belgium. The average age is 11 and a half, and the minimum age is 11, and the highest age is 13. 11 females and 10 males were partner. And they come from the French and the Flemish part of Belgium. There were less somatic problems, so they have less somatic problems and less anxiety. And they have increased resilience, so they can cope better with problems. Oh, and then I have to go for Italy. Give the floor to Chiara. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much for this conference and for organizing all this. So I will present the data connected to the video that we have seen early on this morning. So I'm very excited to connect numbers to faces and children and teachers. So that's very inspiring for me. And then I will also present some data from the prison setting, which was one of the extension of the friends that happened in the past months. And we will see the video this afternoon, I think, related to that. So these are numbers, but there are also faces and people that confirm what I'm going to illustrate now. So basically what we did in school was to go into, thanks to the implementation team, to this huge school in Bolzano, and a total of 92 students of elementary school were enrolled for the project. Half of them were female and male. The mean age was 9 years, so they were in 4th and 5th grade, as we have seen from the video this morning. And basically we had 5 classes. 3 of them received the protocol of meditation, the quiet time, immediately, so from January basically to March. And other 2 classes that are the control group, so they were told that they would have received the meditation afterward, so from March to June. So they are the waiting list condition or the control condition. And this is basically what we did. So we have 3 assessment time, one in January for all the 5 classes, one in March, again with the 5 classes, and then another assessment just for the other 2 classes that received the meditation in the second run. And these basically are the results that are in line with the one that my colleagues just presented. So basically here we have the comparison between the group that received the meditation immediately, the 3 classes that are the blue ones, and the other 2 classes that were on waiting list condition. So it means that when it comes to emotional problems, the students that receive meditation decrease their emotional symptoms and also their problems with peers, with friends in school. And the other 2 classes had a different pattern, meaning that the school year, the school stress impacted on their emotional well-being, and they received no meditation, no intervention during those time. The same for other dimensions. So again, conduct problems, hyperactivity, and behavioral controls. So it's the same dimensions that my colleagues illustrated. So those who received meditation immediately, they benefited from the meditation, and the other students in the waiting list or natural condition, you see that they presented problems probably connected to the stress in school and the stress of the school year. And finally, this is the total score of the questionnaire that, again, show that the total difficulties of children decreased thanks to the meditation compared to the control condition. So basically, we can say that these are very promising results. This slide here shows the trend of the classes that were assessed 3 times. So the waiting list condition, after they received the meditation, you see the green bar, meaning that at the end of the school year, they maintained or improved even in some dimension, and like again, relational problems or hyperactivities or the total difficulties, meaning that also in those 2 classes that received the meditation in the second run, they benefited from it, okay? And they do not impair in terms of stress and difficulties during the school year, particularly in June, which we know it's a very tough moment of the school year because they are finishing the class, there are a lot of exam, tests, and so on. So also in that case, meditation was helping them to buffer those kind of anxiety. Okay, and this is basically the total sample. So we aggregated data and we measured the effect of the meditation in the 5 classes, so on the 92 students. And again, basically we have also in that case improvement in emotional problems, so they are doing better in emotional problem, in total difficulties, but also in somatization. So the same data that my colleague showed before me. So these are basically very good and promising results. And the novelty of this research is basically that we applied the meditation in very young population, very young children, and this is not so frequent in the literature, scientific literature, and we also used a very rigid research design. So the waiting list condition, and then they receive the meditation. And this is a very important strength, at least by a research point of view. So these are very, very promising and good outcome of the Friends project. Okay, so I will conclude my presentation with the implementation in prison that we will see this afternoon. Again, also in this case, we have a few interventions with the meditation in the prison context, not especially in Italy, at least to my knowledge. What we know is that in this kind of setting, the meditation had positive effect on health, well-being, self-esteem, relationship, and also moral reasoning, as my colleagues was mentioning in the previous presentation. Some other research demonstrated a reduction in recidivism, criminal acts, psychological stress, anxiety, depression, and so on. As I said, there are not so many applications of meditation in prison, and we wanted to test if our protocol was applicable also in an Italian prison context. Importantly, we will see this afternoon that we applied the meditation in staff and prison officers, and also in inmates. And those inmates were those with a very long detention time. Okay, so inmates with a long time that they were inside the prison, and they expected to stay there for a very long time as well. Okay, so this is the sample. So a total of 32 individuals. Half of them was inmate, half of them was prison officers, and these are the socio-demographic characteristics. And we tested them with the same instruments that we used for teachers and for adults in the Friends project. So that's the reason why this is an extension of the Friends projects. And we see here basically the same results that we obtained for teachers. Again, so this is the total sample. So over the 32 individuals that received meditation, we have a decrease in anxiety from pre-intervention to post-intervention, and decrease in stress, significant effect, but also an increase in positive affect, so increase in well-being, positive emotions that increase, and negative emotions that decrease. So the balance, the overall well-being increased after receiving the protocol of the TM. This is the result. These are the results that yes? Yeah, I think so. Yes, after 3. So the same format that we used for the protocol with the teachers in France. And here are the results on the inmate sample. So the people with severe stress, of course, because they are in prison since a long time and they are expected to stay there for a very long time. So you see here a huge decrease in anxiety, huge decrease in depression, and being a clinical psychologist, to me this is a very promising result because depression in prison setting is very tough to address, so meditation was very helpful there. And the same improvement also in negative affect, so the overall well-being and symptoms do improve after receiving TM. And this is the same for the prison officers, improvement in anxiety, so decrease in anxiety, improvement in emotional well-being, and also in life satisfaction. That are basically the same results that we obtained for teachers. So that's another confirmation of the protocol. Okay, so the conclusion of this implementation part in Italy is that a positive effect on TM in the prison context, especially for anxiety, depression, and well-being. And so we can conclude that the meditation is a promising and simple instrument to be used in the prison setting. And we will see in the video that participants really liked the project and benefited from that. Okay, I'm done, and I will...
Okay, now I'm getting a professional like this. So we also had a qualitative study conducted with teachers and staff. We conducted semi-structured interviews. It means that we used open questions to allow the respondents to disclose as much information as they wanted, and we evaluated 9 teachers along these 4 domains. In this case, perceived behaviors are indiscipline in their classes, environment learning, school atmosphere, and personal benefits that they retrieve from the Quiet Time program as individual, social, and professional benefits. Being really fast, on the first domain, the perceived behaviors, teachers spoke on an overall change, feeling better, saying that the silence in the classroom is higher, that observed a subjective well-being increase. Students, they see them as more relaxed and more quiet and ready to learn. And they started to better understand the teacher. These are quotes from the interviews. And the students are more focused. So they perceive overall increased achievements in perceived behaviors and a decrease in discipline. Also, in environmental learning, they can see that their students are more receptive, more autonomous, and now they finish their tasks in time and they work more harmoniously. So there is a better environment learning. School atmosphere. Teachers told us that initially that there was some resistance from other colleagues that were not involved in the program. This is not new, it happened before, and in Europe teachers said to us the same thing, but along the time it disappeared. And in the school atmosphere, they feel that there are less interpersonal conflicts and they are improving their abilities to deal with conflicts, which contributes to a good school atmosphere. So good climate, more acceptance and cohesion among colleagues. According to Personal benefits, we can say that they refer an increase in subjective well-being. They feel more tolerant, inner peace, and more grateful. And they feel that they have more personal resources. As you can see, there's a long list of context units that were retrieved from the answers. But we can say, or we can transcribe the regulate my anxiety. People are calmer. I have more rationality in conflict management. So they feel that they have more resources to deal with the adversities in the environment. So I'm now passing to Annette to conclude. Thank you.
So I'm proud to present the summary key findings on behalf of the complete research team, and I thank you all for your cooperative work together, and for the organization and the implementation group and the research group and well, the overall. So the summary key findings are very positive. The Transcendental Meditation has a positive, significant effect in psychological dimensions with effects on well-being for children and adults. So we think it's a very good result, and especially adults report greater and better connection with others. So it's very important for schools, school teachers to have good connections with their pupils, and the pupils with the peer pupils and the teachers. Increase sense of self-competence, increase sense in subjective well-being, and the children report less anxious and more resilience. So thank you all.
I forgot to read, and I'll put it back. It's the last one that caused an impact yesterday, and we were saying that maybe you should read it. Before practicing TM, I was crying in a lot of mornings because I didn't want to come to school. Now those days are distant, I'm calmer, so it's a good conclusion for what teachers told us. Okay, so thank you very much again.
Thank you very much. And now, starting from the results of this evaluation, it's very important to foster systemic change and to make sort of recommendations on the basis of what we have done. And that's why I would like to give the floor to Professor Alberto Bramanti from Bocconi University.
Thank you, Maria Rita, and again, welcome to anyone. I have a bad news and a good news to give you. And the good news is that this is the last intervention now, the theoretical part of the workshop, and then we move to the experiential part, which is more alive and emotionally involving. And the bad news is that my intervention will last for around 1 hour, but I give you some passion for that. So let me start with the agenda. I have 3 main points. First of all, I have few brief consideration on what I call the Well-Being New Deal and the idea of systemic change, just to explain the title of my speech. The second point is devoted to the financial issue. We are at the end of the FRIEND project, and now we are looking to the scale-up phases as an intermediate step toward the full running phase. But the growth path will cost. It is an investment. And the third point addresses both national and European policy intervention, offering our recommendations and tracing a line toward a systemic change in educational system around Europe. Well-being is among the sustainable development goal of the 2030 agenda. Well-being goes hand in hand with the Green New Deal, which is spreading in different countries, even though with some light and shadow. And so the economy of well-being is a bright new narrative which the Finnish European presidency is championing to frame the interplay between economic and social policies. In a world of rising inequality, to preserve the social dimension of economic choices is all the most important, and the educational sector is on the front line. So, therefore, it's refreshing to see such a shift in the understanding of the economy, with government officials contending that investing in well-being makes sense in economic terms, even in times of economic downturn. Well-being and social inclusion are two sides of the same coin, and research confirms that spending on childhood and family support policies benefit for society in the long term. The Europe 2020 strategy expires soon, and the new social framework of the European Pillar of Social Rights is assumed to guide the social dimension of the Union. So this is the moment for school to ride the waves, to experiment system change, to strengthen the alliances with families and territorial communities, because new opportunities are at arm's length, while the cost of do nothing are huge and still rising, and if we do not invest in well-being. We have to open our eyes, and in this slide I want to draw your attention on three main different macro costs, very huge and dramatically widespreading. The first one is the global cost related to physical, psychological, and sexual violence that have been estimated to range between 3 and 8% of the global GDP. This is a massive cost, many times higher than the investment required to prevent much of the violence from taking place. The second one is the cost of early school leaving, and there is a strong evidence that low educational attainment is associated with high economic cost for private individual and society. Across OECD country, almost 1 of every 5 students does not reach a basic minimum level of skills, and this indicates a lack of inclusion. And students from low socioeconomic background are twice as likely to be low performers, and this indicates a lack of fairness. So the lack of inclusion plus the lack of fairness fuels school failure, on which dropout is the most visible manifestation, with 20% of young adults on average dropping out before finalizing upper secondary education. And the third and equally harmful cost is the cost of teacher sickness, teacher burnout. It is very high, and schools have some of the highest rate of absenteeism of any workplace. And the majority of schools fails to prioritize a work-life balance for their teaching staff. And so stress at work is a real problem for many teachers. We can reduce this cost, in many cases dramatically, by investing in well-being program and inclusive education. So, we have to prioritize our investment. We have to put our money where the potential return on investment is higher. I reported here 3 different programs. The first is a cure program, and the second and the third are 2 prevention programs. And we know that prevention always is better than cure, where better means also that it will cost much less. These are back on the envelope evaluations, but confirms that investing in well-being is a strong priority and that KIT-UTM is an effective way to do so. Coming now to the financial strategies of the Well-Being New Deal, we have to recognize that the inspiring criteria of a founding rule for the education system should respond to the general principle of equity in educational opportunity. So we have to invest in fairness, which means support improved student outcome by providing equity of educational opportunity to every student. And we have also to invest in inclusion, which means that specific needs come first, and then the remainder of funding should be distributed on a per-student basis. And we know that among the mainly and different specific needs, inclusive education and well-being outcome have a special place. But we have to measure and to judge the most effective programs, because they are many and diversified, but they are not all equivalent. The French project have proved the effectiveness of a specific program, the KTUTM, that have confirmed to offer a very exciting cost-benefit ratio. So, gathering all the lessons learned from the France project, we can derive some policy implication to support schools in doing their best in achieving well-being goals, to war with their struggling and working hard. We must move from the exceptional to normality, to everyday life. And so we need to engage school in long-term capacity building communities. We need to support a multi-year financial plan. And whatever will be the financial rule, we want to have some injection of some degree of meritocracy. So it will better introduce a reward clause, possibly measured on the outcome in terms of student well-being. And we should guarantee also the full availability of all extra budgeting resources gathered by the school at the local level from the surrounding community. We know that policy of well-being go far beyond the educational dimension, and therefore are those on which a joint investment by the school and its community is most appropriate. So in the last two slides, I raise some policy recommendation at two different levels. And the first is the national one. Two main recommendations for the national level: enabling schools to be proactive actor of well-being policy. And the first key word is flexibility. And we know that schools should be allowed to manage a flexible curriculum. And we have heard about the wonderful experience of the Portuguese program, the project for autonomy and curriculum flexibility that has been introduced. That is a positive example that we have to study and imitate it. And the second key word is autonomy. The planning and the use of the funds for the permanent professional training of the teaching staff should be directly outsourced to schools, thus ensuring the implementation of inclusive education and well-being projects. And finally, I will close with some recommendations for the European level. And three main recommendations are here connected. Supporting and fostering the scale-up of meditation-based practices toward the full running phase as a viable answer to the well-being quest. The first is the use of the European social funds in the next programming cycle. We think that it should dedicate a line on the well-being objectives with calls open to school. The eligible cost should also cover the cost of TM teachers. The second is promoting the European Network Teaching Training Center. We have already known about the experience in the Portuguese country as a tool for exchanging good practice, delivering teacher training, and accompanying school whenever there is not a supporting national TTC. And the first one is promoting research on and evaluation of well-being and inclusive education program, building up and maintaining an European evaluation database, and diffusing and fostering a scientific approach with an approved implementation protocol. Thank you for your attention.